live. Okay. Think we're going live. All right, I think we're live and we'll just wait to see. There's my beautiful Kenny. Hi, Kenny. Oh, he says he's going to tune in a little bit later, so I'm not sure we're being seen or heard quite yet. We will wait until somebody shows up. There are some people who are here. If you could let us know if you can see us and if you could hear us, that would be very helpful. Absolutely. Anybody? Okay, not
yet.
I'm pretty sure we're live though. I am just pretty sure that we are live. So, well, this is unusual though. Usually somebody, it says 5 people are watching. Ah, there's Kenny. See, Kenny. Thank you so much, Kenny. Okay, we are officially live, David. So hello, everyone, and welcome. This is Candace Craw-Goldman. It is the 13th of December, 2019, and I am welcoming my good friend and colleague, David Manning, today to talk about all kinds of things. But very first thing I want to do, David, is wish you a very happy belated birthday. Happy birthday, David.
Oh, thank you, Candace, and thank you for arranging this this interview. It's always a real pleasure to connect with you. So I enjoy our chats a lot.
I do too. I really do. So, you know, the welcome screen showed something that was very important that happened to you just recently in a meditation, this Egyptian symbol of the Ankh. And I don't even know if I'm even saying that right. Why don't you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I'm saying it right. And who does know if we're saying it right? They might have pronounced it very differently. But where to begin with that story? Because it did actually begin once I'd sat with it and realized it had actually begun some years ago. When I had been in the British Museum, which is in London. It's a really nice museum. If you're ever in London, it's free. Go and have a look. It's a lovely museum. And it's got a fabulous Egyptian room in there. And I'd wandered through the Egyptian room. And as always, I'm very taken with they've got 4 amazing statues of Sekhmet, the lion-headed goddess, excuse me, in that section. And I sat and meditated with those. They're very powerful, some other lovely objects. And I was sitting outside in the main hall, sort of outside, just leaning against something. I can't remember what. And I had my eyes closed, leaning against this stone wall, and something sort of tapped my head and said, just receive this. And a golden ankh was dropped into my head. And my whole system just lit up for 2 or 3 seconds, and then everything faded back to normal. It was like, oh, and then nothing. And I didn't think about it. Paid no attention, because I have a lot of those sorts of experiences happening. So I didn't pay much attention to it. But a few months ago, then I was instructed to start to introduce higher dimensional energies into the work I do. And I offer teleconferences to fairly large groups of people, and we work through themes and patterns, and there are energies that download into the collective field, and we work them through, all sorts of lovely things. But there was this specific instruction to start with dimensions 5, 6, and 7, and then separately move into dimensions 8 and 9. And this needed to be done by the solstice, this coming solstice on December 21st, 22nd, depending where you are on the planet. And so I did. lovely teleconference working with dimensions 5, 6, and 7. Honeybees came in to help, which was a beautiful, beautiful gift. There are always lots and lots of elements that come together for a teleconference, none of it orchestrated by me. I simply watch what is assembling, talk about it, write about it a bit, and people resonate with what I'm writing about and join up. And we do the dimensions 8 and 9, and it's very powerful, very beautiful. At the outset, we start with a piece on death, because from my perspective, there was between dimension 7 and 8 a bit of a band, if you're a band of separation, which was our collective belief structure around death. And I think throughout our more recent history, the last 13,000 years, we've had to die to get into these higher dimensions. It's not been possible whilst in a body. Now I don't think that's true. So we worked through some of the stuff around death, and Isis, the mother goddess we know from Egypt, came in to help. And she's a very, very powerful force. And as we were, what I thought, finishing up, sort of rounding up with Dimension 9 and bringing things to an end. There's a team of lion-headed beings work with me, and they introduced themselves quite a number of years ago, and they're an amazing field of energy. They're a universal team who, from my understanding, travel the universe, kickstarting life in planets that are ready for that to happen. They told me they were some of the original seeders of life on this planet, and they gathered DNA from all over the universe and bring it together and get things going. And they were dropping in this symbol into our collective field on the teleconference of dimensions 8 and 9. And as I watched, the symbol was this golden Ankh, and I didn't have much to say about it because I hadn't been warned about this. I never do get warned about what's going to happen. But again, it was a very, very powerful influx of this golden light. And I knew that, I always knew that the symbol of the Ankh represents eternal life or immortality. So I think I mentioned a bit about that, but we drew it to a close because I was a bit stunned by what had happened, as is often the case. And then afterwards, I was meditating. And again, the energy was very, very strong, and I was just bringing it right the way through. But things started to come together, and I recognized that there are lots of elements to this for me that really make sense. Years ago, and there was that incident in the British Museum where the Ankh was dropped into my head then as a preliminary, I guess. And something, because when a symbol like this is dropped into your field by your team or your guides or whatever, it initiates a process, and it might not be evident to you at the personality level, but it'll be working away deep inside you, bringing something to fruition, in effect, and drawing to you, because these symbols are powerful energetics. They draw to you and draw you to the experiences you need to bring them to fruition, or to bring yourself to the right state of maturity or readiness to for something to unfold, whatever it is, and things just started to drop into place. Now, years ago, I'd been doing some, it wasn't a regression piece, it was an inner child piece with a friend. And it started with me and my father trying to work something out there. And we were in this meditation, and I was like, this isn't quite it. And all of a sudden, I just dropped or moved through the back of that meditation, the back of that field, that relationship. And I was in a temple in what I thought was Egypt, being told by guidance, which for me in that temple, the guidance was literally a spaceship parked above the temple, beaming down. But there was no... The communication was extraordinarily direct. It was tangible. And I was being told that it's time to disconnect this. In these temples, groups of us gathered and held frequencies for the planet, to keep the planet vibrating at a particular level, a particular rate. And I was told that it was time to disconnect these extraordinarily intimate connections we had with our off-planetary selves, with our higher self or our cosmic self, and to move into the period of separation that we sort of knew was coming. And this, for whatever reason, devastated me, and I was furious. And it felt like the connection was just ripped out. It was a very, very painful affair that I resisted and resented. I didn't go into that one gently or with any grace at all. And I think that's caused me a lot of problems over the intervening lifetimes. Now, as I was working with the energy of the Ankh after that group meditation, I just understood that now is the time when we as a collective are ready to have this circuitry, and the Ankh represents cosmic circuitry that we are a part of, in effect, that is native to us, that is natural for us. And it just got disconnected. It just got switched off because that was what we had elected at a collective level that we were going to do. Now is the time when it gets switched back on again. And it'll start with a few of us, and we hold the energy field and the frequency of that, and it ripples throughout the collective. It starts to ignite. And of course, there'll be others doing it. The Ankh is a very famous symbol, and it doesn't, I'm not in any way claiming anything about this. This is just something that is happening to me, and I'm sure it's happening to many others around the world. And this won't be the only symbol. Other people that don't relate to that symbol will be having the same experiences, but different symbology, different experiences, So I'll be going through it again next Sunday the 15th of December, where we'll be working with some stones. This is one of those stones, Aquamarine. It's a lovely, lovely aquamarine. So we'll be working with aquamarine energy, because the energy of the aquamarine is the most extraordinary cleansing and clearing energy. Aquamarine literally means water of the sea, and the energy feels like that, but it has a very, very piercing quality. It penetrates deep into the cellular structure and cleanses the cellular structure. It also, from my perspective, and it is the stone that I resonate. I do love stones and crystals. This aquamarine is the stone that by far touches me the most deeply, and I've always wondered why, and then it became clear is that because it links us back to our Atlantean history, and it's a stone whose time has come, in effect, because we are now bridging the gap, not into the chaos and mayhem of Atlantis, but the golden era of Atlantis. Now this is another aspect of aquamarine. This is Heliodor, the same stone. It's a golden version of, it's not golden aquamarine, it's Heliodor, but it's the same constituent. We'll be working with that too, along with this one, which is the pink version. What's that one called? Morganite, peachy pink. So we'll be working with these three stones on this teleconference. They all have a subtle, beautiful role to play. But aquamarine in particular anchors us back to the time in Atlantis when we were, and Atlantis was, as I say, was a long civilization. maybe 100,000 years, some say 200,000 years, some say 40, 50,000 years. Well, who knows? And maybe the length of time isn't particularly important. The last couple of thousand years, by my understanding, were a bit messy. We screwed up a bit, and it collapsed and sank or exploded, by my understanding, about 13,000 years ago. And that was the first big fall in consciousness. That was the disconnect, the tumbling down, the frequency scales, if you like. Well, we've trawled through these depths of density for a long time. We've learnt a lot, understood a lot. Now we're emerging from that. And what is happening, and this, the first time I saw this, it really shocked me, because I thought, well, that can't be, but I think it is. It's as if, you know, when you wake up from a nightmare. God, I'm talking a lot here. I haven't given you a word in edgeways, have I? You know, when you wake up from a dream or a nightmare, and as soon as you sit up in bed, it starts to fade, doesn't it? It was when you're lying there, it's very real, and you can feel it, you can taste it, you can feel all of the emotions. You sit up and it just starts to dissipate. I think the last 13,000 years are a bit like that dream or nightmare. And what we're doing now is arcing back in time to the last time we really lived the truth, and we're pulling it forward into the present, and we're sort of stitching over the 13,000 year gap in time. And I know that sounds crazy, but I also know that when I've healed something really traumatic for myself, it's sort of as if it never happened. And yet I'm enriched by the experience, if you know what I mean.
David,
does that make sense?
It so makes sense. You know, I have to tell you something. Something that's like just happening here while you're speaking. I've been receiving my own kind of downloads, and here's what was happening to me even just while you were talking. I don't think you'll mind me telling our viewers how connected we are.
Yeah.
We seem to be very connected for whatever reason ever since
the first time I saw Candace in the flesh, my heart just went pop like this, and I thought, oh, I love her, and I'd never met her before, so it was one of those meetings. Yeah.
We've just got along fabulously. And while you were talking, David, I have a lump in my throat right now. I mean, I have a real lump in my throat. So I was taking a few notes, but this idea of aquamarine, and of course, this whole idea of water, as I have said over and over again, being liquid consciousness. And what I was receiving as your dear friend was snapshots of your life in the last couple of years, your life where you received the information to move to St. Leonard's by Sea, where you've been swimming in the water. I am vibrating so hard right now. It's a good thing I'm on a concrete floor because if I was on a wood floor right now, I think I'd be making noise. You went through this incredibly significant and huge personal challenge over the last year with your health and cancer, and yet during some of this you were in that ocean swimming, and you were connecting to the planet and meditating, and you were in the water. You were in that water that is, of course, a giant body of water that connects, of course, to all water. And here you are talking about, going back into that realm and then reconnecting these pieces of ourselves to come online. I have this huge sense that your physical move from the city of London down to St. Leonard's on Sea was a big part of this, as a circuit and a conduit to help when humanity checks in with you and your stories and your teleconferences and the connections that you have, and then you even step into the ocean and you have all of this. And I think, even though you know, and I don't want to overstep my bounds there. I think even your challenge of the cancer had something to do with this. It just seems like it, if not completely, in, you know, at least in part, it was an experience for all of us as well, especially when you were sitting in those waters. And I mean, I'm just really, really struck by that. I've never been to St. Leonard's on Sea. I've never seen your apartment. I don't know any of this, and all of this is like coming into my head so incredibly vividly and strongly. I just had to mention it.
Well, I mean, thank you, because that I'm aware that the cancer I experienced, and I have just literally this week received an all clear sort of literally a year after the journey started. And I was told right at the outset of this journey, this is just something you have to go through. Don't worry about it. And this was my guidance, you know. But of course, I'm human. I do worry. And it was an unpleasant experience. I wouldn't recommend it to anybody, but it was made about as pleasant as is possible to be, I think, simply because I followed guidance through it. And I used it to dismantle a lot of the victim archetype that comes up in these circumstances, because that's an important part of our process. Something we have to get to grips with on this journey is the victim archetype, because that is one of the big pillars of collective psychology at the moment. You know, humanity psychology is victim, persecutor interaction, and those archetypes, and it's really important that we get to grips with that. So a life-threatening illness is a great way to flush that out, you know, of the depths of your cell tissue, because it just keeps coming and it takes you by surprise. And it's a beautiful way to move through that, and to find really lovely spaces of peace and equanimity in you know, what is usually a really unpleasant experience. And also, I mean, I had the most astounding experiences with the treatment itself, and I've had this the second time I've had cancer, so I've had a bit of experience. And with this one, I was told, okay, just treat. I had radiotherapy for this. Treat the radiotherapy beams as high intensity, high frequency light beams from the sun coming into your system. So I did. What happened before long, and I was due to have 28 days of radiotherapy, my system would just open up. My heart would open as soon as I would walk into the radiotherapy room and lie on the table. And I would be in bliss for the sessions. It was a lovely, lovely way to receive treatment. There was one day when I was in a shitty space, and I felt as if I was under attack. But for the most part, it was a blissful experience. I'm not trying to gloss over it and say it was all sweetness and light. It wasn't. It was painful. I was frightened. I was angry. I was raging, actually, and I was lonely, and, you know, all of those things came up. But it was, for me, a beautiful, rich opportunity to process that stuff and deepen into the space of knowing that the body isn't the issue. Clinging to life isn't the issue. And it's weird now that I'm doing immortality, or looking at it, not doing it. We're all doing immortality. We don't die. But there's great value in having these, you know, hard brush-ups against death. So you get to really examine and explore your belief systems around it, and your fears, the very natural stuff that we've been trained into. It's really important that we look at this stuff now, because it's got us locked into a very tightly configured planetary field that isn't useful for where we're going. And it's one of those big, big belief systems that we have to dismantle so that we can come into a deep acceptance and recognition, not just the intellectual knowing, but the recognition that, oh, I don't die. I am already immortal. That doesn't come as I tick the boxes and, move through the assignments. That always has been and always will be. The recognition of it emerges as we shed the layers, the overcoats of density that we have worn for thousands of years. And that is what we are in the process of doing now, is clearing the rubble of our history. And this is a nice metaphor, actually, and was shown to me some years ago. It's as if we are, each one of us, our field, our body, each one of us a mini, beautifully equipped spaceship. And in this space capsule, there is everything we could ever need for our incarnational journey, all of them. And yet the controls and the operating system of this highly, highly functioning spacecraft has been covered with layer upon layer upon layer of debris and dust, which is conditioning and belief system of being human. The tragedies, the warfares, the tortures, the pains, the humiliations, the loves, the losses, all of it. Layer upon layer of conditioning. As we now discard all of the conditioning, we're starting to recognize we're sitting in this module. The lights are starting to come on. It's like that film. What was that? Independence Day, where the lights come on in the ship and it starts to, and nobody quite knows what to do with it. That's what we are. We don't begin to understand the capacities we have at our fingertips here. We're just starting to. But the field is this extraordinary craft. And we are each equipped with that. We are each that. But there is also this vast field, the body of humanity. Just one body. There's only one of us in billions of individualized units. And we're starting to recognize ourselves as that one body of humanity. And that brings me back to the sea, surprisingly, because that holds that essence, the one body, the one moving body, the waves, the droplet. You can be both, but you're never separate. And it's it's lovely.
I can't get over, I know we have viewers and I know people are going to be watching this, but I am sitting here having an extraordinary experience with you with these downloads. So more started happening right there, this time about me.
But I think that's because we're tuned into the same
same
fields, in a sense. We probably come from the same spaceship, as it were. So
you have brought me to a place. I think I was somewhere in the neighborhood of 3 years old. I'm one of those adults who can vividly remember my childhood. Not everything, of course, but I have marched through time, and I remember, learning to walk and being in a stroller. I remember all that, which can be unusual for many of us these days. But as you were talking, I was brought to, and I remember exactly where I was. I mean, my bedroom growing up as a child, and my mother sitting on my bed as I'm ready to go to sleep that night. And she was talking to me. I think it was about a cat that we had, who I think got hit by a car is how it died. But my mother was telling me about, the cat is not going to be here anymore, and that it died. And, she was being gentle about it, but she was talking to me about this concept called, death. Now, I was a child that was, maybe my mother and father shouldn't have done this, but boy, did they ever. I was outside by myself at a very small age, doing all kinds of things. I knew what it was when bugs were moving and then they weren't and all that kind of stuff. I saw all of that. But as far as a member of my family, which this cat was, that was one of, my first experiences with this concept of death. And I remember talking to her about it a little bit and suddenly being struck with the realization that, well, wait a second, does that mean you're going to die and I'm going to die? What? And I mean, I remember this was really big information for me at the time. And I remember my mother looking at me, and she did. I love, my mom's long gone. She's been gone 3.5 years. She was a great mother, as she could have been, not ever having a mother herself. She did a pretty good job. But I remember her hugging me and looking at me and looking at me straight in the face and saying, "Oh, don't worry about that. You're not going to die." And I remember, I mean, my whole brain was going, well, wait a second, that doesn't make sense either. I mean, I was already like analyzing all of this and trying to put it together, because I knew if my cat died and those bugs died, the June bugs died, that we were alive and that we would die in trees and plant. I mean, the whole thing was kind of coming together for me as a 3-year-old. And at the same time, the biggest part of my soul was telling me, in some ways, that's correct. You will not die. You're not going to die. You're not going to die. She's right. But the disconnect was, my body will not be here. And of course, my mother didn't have the language or the capacity or the desire to talk to a 3-year-old about any of that. But the point that I want to make here, that I'm buzzing again about, is, as children and as a grandmother now, and watching my own grandchildren come into the world, as very small children, we're still very connected to that bigger spirit that we are, that is immortal, right? And then we do our own sort of fall and our own sort of disconnect, accepting that. And we put the veil, puberty. Have you all heard about this? I'm sure you have. Puberty itself does this thing to our pineal gland, not to mention the fluoride and all the other things that are going on. But we disconnect even more, our society does, and then we repeat the patterns. And the point I want to make here, after just sharing all of that, is that is one of the reasons that you will hear teachers, wayshowers talk about retaining or reclaiming that childlike sense of wonder. That's such a powerful thing. And I think it's intimately connected with this idea of immortality and anything being possible, and your imagination and your DNA. I mean, there's so many things to unpack here. And I think it has a lot to do with, some of the things that you've said about that this is coming back online.
Yeah, I think lovely what you're saying. And for me as a child, I had a lot of out-of-body experiences very early on, and they terrified me. I would go to bed, I could feel them starting hours before, maybe watching television in the evening, and there'd be this weird trembling in my feet that I couldn't control. And once I knew what it meant, I would just get scared and upset. And I would go to bed and I would try to go to sleep, and I would start to rise up out of my body feet first. So I would sort of do a somersault out, and I would move through the wall that was behind my bed and expect to be in the room on the other side. And I wasn't. I was in just a vast empty space. And I was overwhelmingly terrified by these. But these experiences led me to always know instinctively that I wasn't dependent on the body. So there was always this awareness that, well, I'm not totally that, and I had lots of those weird sort of multidimensional experiences as a child. And as you say, they close down. I think they have to close down so that we get some grasp on physical reality. And then for me, it all opened up again in my 20s. But our religions have really sold us short around death. They have made us terrified, guilty, and ashamed. that we will meet this huge vicious judgment process that will condemn us to eternal damnation if we have made one mistake, you know. And we've had thousands of years of that where it's been pummeled into our psychology. So there's a lot of deeply ingrained anxiety around this issue that has really dimmed the circuitry of immortality that we actually are. And I think, in a sense, we are the Ankh. You know, it's the cross, the looped cross. I think that's our native circuitry, in a sense, and it's just being revivified at the moment. Now, from my understanding, there is a significant switch on point happening at the December solstice. And what I'm going to recommend to, you know, the lovely image you've used of the Ankh, just meditate on an image of the Ankh and invite it into your system, and see what happens. If you're not ready for it, that's fine. It won't come in, but it will start to prepare you for that time, which won't be far away, when you are ready to activate that. And that, because the energies are working so quickly now, as soon as you start to integrate and activate a symbol like that, it, as I said before, brings you to fruition much more quickly. Or you may find that it just drops right on in, and bingo, you're right there. And there is, as I say, this activation point happening, well, between now and the end of the year. And then there's this other big activation, a planetary activation on January the 12th, which is, I don't know if that's a planetary activation, that's an astrological activation, but it's going to have planetary consequences. We're in very intense and beautiful times here. We've just had a big election in this country that did not quite go as anybody was expecting. Yesterday I was meditating, and you know about those elections, don't you? So I was meditating, and I really didn't want the party that won hands down. I didn't want them to win at all, to be honest. And I was meditating, just sort of asking about the election, and this golden shaft of light just shot right the way through into my heart. Words came, it's going to be all right. And there was just this explosion in my heart. And I burst into tears, because with this explosion in my heart, there was a pressure released that I didn't know I was holding even. So I burst into a sharp thing of tears for 2 or 3 seconds. And then it was like, oh, well, maybe the Labour Party is going to win. Labour Party would be our version of your Democrats. Well, they didn't. But it's like, what does this mean then? This ruthless government is in power. How is it going to be all right? I just trust at some very deep level that things are going to work out okay. And maybe these ruthless governments are required in this real time of turmoil and sorting that we're all very much engaged in. I don't have answers at that level. I'm being advised over and over again that the political sphere is not the sphere I need to be focused on, that the energetic realm is where I do my work, but I can't keep my nose out of that out of that sphere for too long. But yeah, it's very interesting, very intense times at the moment, and quite extraordinary. But I do think that the energetics that we have access to and that are being activated now will unfold in us and around us, in us as individuals and as collectives when we collaborate. Just possibilities that will come to fruition, ideas, inventions. The earth keeps telling me, I've got the answers. Ask me. She knows what she needs to clean up what's gone on here, the mess we've made. And I really do think that, I mean, that sounds crazy and it sounds fantastical, but it is what I believe. I think that things aren't such a mess yet that it can't be solved, and fairly quickly too. once we reach this optimal energetic point that is a real sort of shift point, switch on point, 100th monkey, whatever you want to call it. I'm not quite sure the terminology anymore, but I think we're getting close.
Yesterday, I was a part of another tandem BQH session where actually I was the one going into what my colleagues, Candy and Laura, call the bubble, the quantum bubble. And I was tandemly exploring consciousness streams with Candy, which was interesting right there, Candy and Candace, while Laura was asking us questions. And some of this came up as well. And there was such a unanimous sense of information coming that is much like the one that you just described. Of course, we are having some quite vicious fighting going on in our government as well. And the answer that came, the advice that came, was so much like what you just said, to really trust, to have faith. This is part of what having faith is, that we really are, as a humanity, waking up more and more. The hearts of the people really are turning on, opening up. We really are connecting, that we don't have all the information. You cannot know just through your little box and machine all the real information and what's really going on. You only get a small part of it. And some of it is a lot of noise that is just a lot of bluster that doesn't really connect to anything, except for the fact that those people can make a lot of noise. So, but I want to make this point because this kind of was surprising and it was amazing. And this session will be edited by Candy and Laura and will be coming out on YouTube. So look for that. I'll definitely post that on our Quantum Healers channel for those of you who are listening. But there was a portion of this session, or there was a portion of the answer to that question that had to do with the human heart field. And the advice, if there was any advice, or the observation was, if you really are watching some of this stuff out there and you have, I think I even used the word catty, you have kind of catty comments to make about the side that your conscious mind isn't maybe particularly agreeing with right then you are not assisting in what's going on here. And you may feel justified in some of these reactions, but it's not really extremely helpful. What's more helpful is to understand that you don't know everything. The bigger picture is happening. But if you just realize that you are following your heart, much as maybe some others who have a different perspective, a different reality, they're following their information in their heart. And we really are, I think, headed for the same place. And when we were talking about some of this in the session, all of a sudden my heart just went boom, and it connected with Candy's, and then it dropped down into the very center of the planet. And then the heart of the earth, the center of the earth, the Gaia's heart, just got so big. Tears were coming. I could barely speak. And what was interesting is, as I'm watching all of this, my partner Candy was she was seeing as I was describing, like before I could describe it, the center and how it felt. And then I was kind of almost lost for words. I'm like, well, what's really interesting, I'm feeling this so in my body. And then it moved straight up to my throat. And then some of the information that came from that was, this is because we really are having this collective Kundalini rising thing happen. And we've been working on this so much, this part, our heart. And it just kind of went kind of into this part, this part. And of course, this is part of why we call it ascension. We're activating all of this, right? But please remember, we still have that root chakra, that root red chakra that is connected to survival. Look at our ancestors. My mother, who didn't have enough food when she was a kid, that survival chakra we're still working on that, if not directly through disease or circumstance, through our ancestral line. And you think, well, I've cleared that already. Well, okay. I think we've all been, most of us have been at this long enough to know that you're just going to be clearing. You're going to continue to clear, understand, and move this way.
Totally. And one of the big issues that locked in the base chakra is death, isn't it? You know, this, which locks us into that fight or flight or freeze programming. And it's that's why I think it's so important to be able to relax around that whole issue and recognize, oh, we don't go anywhere. You know, we just continue to exist in different forms. We breathe into incarnation, we breathe out of incarnation. And we do that over and over again. You know, they're like the big in and out breaths of the universe at a smaller scale, you know, 70 years or 30 years or 50 years, however long we take for any given incarnation. It's time that we lighten up on ourselves around this grip on life. And I'm not saying it's not precious and wonderful, because I think it is. I think there are opportunities available to us when we're in physical form that we don't get anywhere else. You know, it's rare and it's hugely valuable. But it's not the only game in town. And it was made clear to me years ago when I was asking, well, how long am I going to live then? How long am I going to live? It's like, you're here to do a specific job of work. And when that job is done, there are other places in the universe that are far more exciting to explore. It's like, oh, maybe, you know, and so that was like, when I was again faced with death this year, or the possibility, it was like, well, you know, I'm not worried about what I'm going to, because I think it's going to be really, really interesting apart from anything else. You know, I'm quite excited about the prospect whenever it happens, although I'm also really, really enjoying my life in physical reality too. And I think the more we all reach that space, then there's a freedom and a grace that can emerge that makes life much, much more fun, and means that we can take it much less seriously. And we can really start to play with manifesting what it is our hearts and our souls long to manifest through us, without being programmed by the base chakra survival instincts that you know, that it's got to, you know, we're like this, holding on for dear life. We never let go of life, and life never lets go of us. So we can relax around that and start to have fun.
Hey, speaking of having fun, I want to make a request, an announcement right now. Can we have a play date when we're done with this life so that we can meet up in that next play?
I'm sure there are planets of rest and recuperation where we go to for a while. Huh?
You know, kind of like, yeah, meeting somewhere for a glass of bubbly or something. I want, you know, I'm officially setting up that play date in our future calendar of whatever and wherever we are, because I don't want to let this connection with you go. You know, speaking of that, we were talking about this idea shortly before we started broadcasting this afternoon for you, this need for community and connection, how even what happens over on the sidebar in the live chat, this is something that is becoming more and more important to people, actual connection. And you know, sometimes the devices make it, well, tricky, you know, because it can be very nice to get a nice warm physical hug from somebody. And I can't wait to do that again with you someday. And I was happy to be able to do it a couple of times already in my human life. But this need for community and groups, you know, how are you thinking about that as we're moving into the solstice and into the year of 2020?
I think, if I can speak, I think it's being stimulated by this growing awareness of ourselves as this one body of humanity. So we're starting to recognize that we are this community, and we've been disintegrated as a species. In a sense, we've been separated. There are boundaries and borders. There are religious affiliations and tribal affiliations. We hate them and we like them and we're at war with, all of this sort of stuff. So we become frightened of each other, and we've individualized ourselves to the nth degree. Now we're recognizing, oh, what I do here in my backyard affects my neighbors, and not just my neighbors on either side, but the next village. And the smoke, if I'm burning a fire, blows across the town. We're recognizing we all have global impact, with the bit of plastic, or the money we spend, or what we watch, what we pay for in our shop, all of that sort of stuff. We all have global impacts, where this is starting to weave us together again as a collective, as the one body of humanity that we have always been. But we've gone on this journey of density, and we've explored density. Now we're expanding back out into the one body of humanity, or unity consciousness. That's what it is. And we are, at a physical level, animals, and animals like to be with other animals. They like, even cats and dogs, they love to cuddle together in their baskets and sleep curled around each other. Bodies like other bodies. They like that closeness, that companionship. And when we get, I don't do so much in-person work anymore, but I did my first in-person event since January. I did it towards the end of November. It was really, really lovely. No, that's not true, actually, but I did an in-person event towards the end of November. It was really lovely just to be with a group of like-minded people in the same room, sharing the same space, sharing the same energy field, and then talking about it afterwards, going for coffee, chatting, sharing some food, all of this sort of stuff. We need that interaction, but one of the great things about technology is that it allows the development of worldwide group fields. And this is what I'm mesmerized by, in effect, at the moment. See, you've got something Christmassy there. It's your mug, huh?
Yeah. That
you could use that to feed a, you could
yeah.
use it to feed a reindeer too. That's huge, isn't it? So technology allows us to connect across the continents, all around the world, and build these super conscious fields that we used to do in temples. And we would hold space in temples thousands of years ago. We would meditate, we would pray. We would hold these high frequency states, but they were only for the few, only for the initiated, only for those that had gone through the years and years and years of rigorous trainings. Well, all of us now have gone through lifetimes and lifetimes of rigorous trainings, and all of the deep wisdoms we have encoded within us are lighting up and coming back online. They're all file disks that are coming up out of the superluminous fibers of our multidimensional spaceship that we are at the controls of, and they're all there. So we've got all of the technology. It is what we are. And as we connect across the planet, we find that we can create fields of energy that have very real power. And we know about the power of group consciousness. We see it. We used to see it here in this country in what we termed football hooliganism back in the 1970s, where you could see the group mood shifting and it becoming chaotic and people getting caught up in the violence. We all know what it's like, at a party or something, the group field. I had a party here the other night. I don't drink at all, but there was quite a bit of drinking going on. I felt completely smashed. I had a lovely, lovely time, but didn't touch a drop of alcohol. But I realized afterwards, oh my God, I was really quite drunk there, It was the group field, in effect, and the fact that I am reasonably empathic. But there is real power in these group fields. And we're starting to recognize that we can put these to work for us. And again, this is another major, major tool that we have at our disposal now to bring the planet back into balance. And I don't believe she's gone that far out of balance.
Yeah, I don't think so either. No, I don't
So,
think so either. I want to talk a little bit about, again, some of the connections and similarities about the things that you've been talking about, and it's been showing up in things and activities that I've had both personally and with others. The honeycomb and the bee, there's a lot of that happening, some really interesting takes on that. I've often said humans, we say we're introverts, we say we're loners. Think about this a little bit. The absolute worst punishment that another human can impose on another is to put them in a room and call it solitary confinement.
yeah.
I had a BQH session with a man a couple of years ago who unabashedly, as he was talking to me about how painful this was, I was listening to him and my eyes were welling up with tears. And partially because this man was, this broke him. I mean, it absolutely broke him. Here's what's interesting. This idea of, solitary confinement, the only conversation he had for months and months and months was he figured out how to take his toothbrush and tap inside of his sink. Morse code to the fella. I mean, humans find a way, right? I mean,
really, it's extraordinary.
Yeah. He held on to this connection. The mistake that this man did was he had a temper, and he actually, a cop got in his face and then he shoved him and he actually slugged him, and he was put in solitary confinement for a number of months and was in jail altogether for a number of years, just for, there are murderers who get out for less than that, but because it was somebody in authority and able to stick it to him, but he did. Here's what was interesting about that. This man sitting, and he was exploring some of this in our session, our BQH session. He was talking about how horrible it was and how it absolutely broke him. He was a fairly kind man anyway. He never even had a parking ticket before then. The cascade of these incredible events brought him to this point where he was a law-abiding citizen and then in solitary confinement for a moment of losing it, right? He said it broke open his heart and he had love for everyone and everything. He walked like he was this glowing ball of, he appreciated everything. I got a pebble in my shoe. Oh, thank you. I get to feel that. I'm not in my cell where there's no pebbles that can ever get into my shoe. I mean, it was an amazing experience to talk to this man. So this idea of, being solitary, it's the worst thing you can do to a human. But back to the honeycomb, the imagery is everywhere. And I had this incredible dream, Dolores Cannon and Masaru Emoto dream. And I wrote about it, I have a blog somewhere. But it was really interesting because each honeycomb, there's the honeycomb where it's an individual, and then it's a honeycomb where it's the energetic that actually covers, I think, and some people may call it the crystal grids or the energetic grids that cover the planet. I really believe that shape may have something to do with this. And in that dream, it was all about, watch what happens to this honeycomb cell when we put water in it. It went from sort of being sluggish and whatever, and inside was like the flower of life, and the flower, and you put water in it and it went like this, and then its energy connected to this one, and it affected it, like this, which is why we say over and over again, work on yourself, people. Don't look across the honeycomb and say, well, that cell 10 spaces over and 3 down. I don't like how dark and yucky what's going on over there. Well, don't worry about that. That's not for you. What's for you is here, because this is where you have an effect. Be as bright and as amazing and as heart-centered as you can, all by yourself, in yourself, and watch what that does in your life and in the life of others around you, and then the planet at large. And yes, it's so wonderful to be able to connect in this way through technology, to be able to, increase that energy.
It is, isn't it? It's an amazing gift that we have at our disposal, and I'm delighted to get to do it with you. And it's a real gift that, I was just musing on this morning, just thanking my lucky stars that I get to run my life in this very, very simple way, running teleconferences, communicating online, doing a bit of in-person work. And it's like, oh my God, there I've got a setup for a lovely life that enables me to move to be by the sea. And it wasn't, you referred to St. Leonard's on Sea and how you felt that it was really important that I was here. I didn't choose this place myself. This was a guidance place. I didn't even know this place existed. I heard the name of this place 3 times, and I thought it was in Scotland. And I thought, well, that's a long way to go. But and then I went off and looked at it on the map, and it was very close. Well, not very close, but it was 70 miles from London, which is very doable, But coming here, I realized that I have landed in a community. And my home was filled with this community the other night for my party, and I felt so overwhelmed with love. And I think those loving spaces become much, much more easy for us to co-create now, because there is literally more of the frequency of love in the atmosphere. So if you're choosing to focus on the shit that she's dealing out down the street, or the nasty politicians, or the pedophiles, or the conspiracy theories, you're missing the fact that love is raining down on this planet every second of every day, and is flowing up from deep in the core of the earth every second of every day, right now. And it's there for us to make use of in our own lives and to enrich the lives of others. It's important for us to focus on that and to expand that, to grow that in our own homes, our own lives, our own communities. And that's the way that we reinvent this world. That's the way we create the communities we want, the lives we want, the schools we want, the jobs we want. That's how it happens. And it's not that difficult. I come to this town, this scruffy, scrappy little town that has such a vibrant life force. It's extraordinary. It's also got a really vicious heroin problem. And the two go hand in hand. It's like, well, there we go. That's quite strange. But
that may be why you're there.
Who knows?
I am in rural Kansas. Enough said. There's just, I am a little bit of fish out of water. There's so many ways that's shown to me. I get in my truck every day when I do have to leave the farm, and I'm surrounded by wheat fields as an incredibly gluten sensitive person,
That's ironic, isn't it? That's really ironic. Yeah?
I'm in a sea of wheat fields, and I'm still working out my emotional thing with the oil pump jack that is north of my farm. It's so interesting. There's one on the east side of me, and I know about prevailing winds, and when we first got here it wasn't moving, and then I've talked about this pump jack on a Facebook post. I asked, well, what is your daily trigger? That one's mine. It still is. I'm working on it. Every time I look at it, I'm like, this is an opportunity for you to figure out what's going on in you here, so that you can either accept it, shift your perspective. I don't even know what. I ask myself a lot. It's the thing I'm working on. I'm continually working on it. But here's the thing that I think about, which is the one that was on the east of us, which is powered in a different way. It's much closer to us, but the winds blow away, the sound and any sort of wafts of any petroleum smell completely away, the prevailing winds. but it will on a very quiet, you can hear it clank, clank, clank. And there are times when I'm like out at the barn and I'm hearing the owls and the birds and my horse is eating or whatever. And I'm so loving all of this cushion of incredible quiet, clank, clank. And it, you know, and I worked on that for like years. And my husband was like, I don't even hear it anymore. And I'm like, I wish I didn't hear it anymore. And I focused on it. Well, here's what happened. I just find this completely, I mean, I'm laughing at myself. So what happens years after me focusing on the clank? North of us goes another one in. And it's not powered the same way. It's powered with this natural gas propane tank that is so much worse. I am longing for the clank. I mean, it's like, that seems quaint now to me, just quaint. But you know, then I look at it, I'm like, this is a perspective, right? I'm focusing on, oh my gosh, I don't like that. I had no idea about how incredibly annoying how this propane thing, there are times, and I know it's crazy, part of me is like, am I really feeling this where I'm in this house and I can feel the motor of that thing and that protein in the center of my bones in my body? And I'll even say to somebody, can you feel that? No. You know, can you hear that? Not really. Why? Why is it doing? And then I try, you know, and I'm going round and around like this. I find it fascinating. It's an endless personal issue that I'm working on.
Part of that sensitivity, I believe, is, you remember years ago we worked with each other, and I had the sense, and I was starting to have the sense then of people's energy fields, not the personal energy field, the small sort of everyday energy field, but the expanded energy field, usually the energy field we take no notice of, we're not in any way aware of, which for some of us can be vast, and more of us are holding these vast spaces for big pieces of the planet. That's part of the honeycomb thing, that we're holding these light cells, if you like, and they're connecting and communicating with each other. We're holding the planet in a superluminous field of light. But those fields of light transmit sensitivity in a rare and wonderful way, but it's sort of across the board, is that you could feel the mouse 3 miles away, but you could also feel that pump thing, you know, in the core of your bones. So maybe you've just got to get creative with your field, your expanded field, and be out there at those pumps and just see what, or maybe you can ask your field, how can we shut these down? Or
well, I tried the shut things down one with the clinkety clank one, and that didn't work. And what I got was this other thing. And there's a part of me, I mean, and you know, this is kind of humorous, but there's a part of me that's thinking, if you don't stop focusing on how much you don't like that, they're going to open up a dynamite quarry right next to that thing, and you're going to hear blasts and something completely, you know. And then I tell myself, well, at least it's not a cell phone tower, and at least it's not a chemical plant. I mean, I don't know. It's certainly interesting. It does bring a lot of thoughts to play, and I appreciate your perspective on that. I also know, and when I have sat in meditation, and in the deepest part of me, what I realize is there is once again, and how I even started this conversation, I guess, there's a real reason I am here, exactly right here, in the middle of the wheat fields, being gluten insensitive, right next to this petroleum-based thing that I didn't even know it was possible to be bothered so much by something like this. And at the same time, and I understand the irony, the complete irony of this, I get my big diesel truck, my big farm truck, and I drive it around. You know, I don't have an electric car. Electric cars can pull horse trailers and haul farm equipment supplies. They can't do it. I'm taking my horse Harris when we're done with this call to a friend's house down the road, and no Tesla is going to be able to pull my
No,
horse.
we like our petroleum driven vehicles.
And here and my driveway, when I get to the end of my driveway to turn onto my main road, that's when I get the clearest picture of that. I'm in my, and I have to laugh at myself. This is part of the humorous part of being human. And, I think that's what I love about you so much. Your capacity to see the different ways of looking at things. Back again to a little more somber note, this idea, look how powerful we are when you are in the hospital getting the treatment that you did, and you went into it with a perspective, a trust, and a focus that is so different than most, 99.5% of people who go into that room are, oh my God, I'm scared out of my mind at this machine with its sort of death rays. And you decided to follow your guidance that didn't make a lot of sense sometimes, which is think of it as the sun. And actually, when you were talking about that, even to go back to earlier in the broadcast, when you were talking about that, all except for that one day, you thought of it as the sun. And, we have the sun, those of us who aren't in that circumstance, we have the sun where we can use the sun to move into our energy fields and find those areas that need light.
Yeah, because I was aware with the cancer that it was a concretization in me of very hardened patterns that I couldn't shift, that I'd been working, and that this light therapy, because that's what it is, it's a light therapy. It might be a sort of a clumsy, brutal light therapy, but it is still that, was a really useful tool for me. It burnt something out of my system. Now, again, it's not something I would recommend unless you have to do it. But I'm also not an advocate of holistic methods only. I'm really not. I've seen quite a few people die because they refused chemotherapy, they refused medical intervention, when I think medical intervention may well have saved them. They might have gone on to have another 10, 15 years. Yeah, there are side effects of these things, but we're extraordinarily inventive and creative and capable. So I'm all for holistic measures and combining the two. Certainly, I did a lot of that. I did a lot of energy work all the time, but don't be frightened of the best treatments that medicine has to offer too. Don't cling to holistics because you're terrified of being poisoned. Our systems are capable of handling extraordinary levels of bombardment, of toxicity, of radiation, all of these things. And as we become more and more and more aware of ourselves as operating in these much higher frequencies of light, these much higher dimensions, and we are really doing that now, and that's a piece of work that I'm really focusing on, then these become our protection, our safeguard, if you like. And when I was going, I just had a PET scan last week or 2 weeks ago or something like that, where you are injected with a radioactive isotope. And you're told after this, now you can't stand close to pregnant women or young children for 8 hours because you're radioactive. It's like, oh, Jesus, thanks very much. And I was sitting in the waiting room waiting for this scan, and I thought, oh, I better ask, what is it we can do to protect the body? And I wasn't expecting the answer that came, but I was told, download the dimensions of the frequencies of dimension 10. So I was sitting in the waiting room, this hospital waiting room, downloading these frequencies, and they came in and they were spectacular. So after 5 minutes, I didn't care what was happening in the scan room, because again, I was back in bliss. So had the scan and felt deeply, deeply held and cushioned by the frequencies that I had integrated into my system. Now, I think these are technologies that we have available to us. We can lift ourselves, literally lift ourselves out of the low frequency fields of, I don't know what you want to call them, contamination or infiltration that are very, very present and becoming more and more active on this planet. We just have to get creative and understand what it is we are capable of, what it is we naturally are, which is multidimensional fields of light and intelligence that are immortal. And those frequencies are going to be bumped up seriously over the coming weeks. So yeah.
Well, that's a good time for in a moment for you to tell us about what's coming up for you before we close today. I do want to talk about something that I really felt the presence of my beautiful Dolores Cannon show up here when you were talking about sort of the fear. It comes back to something you said earlier in the broadcast too, about you're not going to die until the job you came to do here is done. I'm often curious about those people who attempt suicide 16 different ways and can't manage to make it work. If that isn't something that sort of tells you, you know, something. And I think I actually even talked about something as it pertains to Dolores in the event that I did yesterday that will eventually be on YouTube. But she had a particular thing happen to her and her husband. Because of the work she did, she knew that her husband was going to survive this horrific accident that no one should have survived. But because she knew his job wasn't done, and she knew with all of her heart that there were going to be years left for him to be with their family, he did not die, surprising everybody when the doctors are like, prepare yourself, and it just didn't happen. A second thing happened with Dolores. She was told over and over again by her team that she would be working until she was 100. Now, the woman died at 83, right? But I don't think what she was told was incorrect, because I believe she's here influencing the planet, continuing to connect with humanity, and she's continuing to do her work. And I'm getting goosebumps with that. I may go circle the year on the calendar when that's 100. Maybe that's when suddenly I won't be able to hear her anymore. I don't know. But there is that. But we're coming up on the solstice. And you know, I didn't even mention it, but it is Friday the 13th. This is a powerful day all in it of itself, after yesterday's day of the 12th, the full moon and everything. Today's Friday the 13th, and we're heading into some significant energy alignments, and you're going to have an event. Why don't you tell us about it?
On the 15th, I have an event coming up, which is the Aquamarine fields, working with these beautiful, beautiful friends. And all I do when I'm working with stones, whether that's with an individual or with a collective, is I hold the stone and just move energy through it into the field, the group field or the individual field, and watch what it does. And I'm always blown away. I learn so much watching stones, the energy of and the intelligence of stones interact with us. So that's where we will work with the beryl family. These are the constituent mineral is beryl, B-E-R-Y-L. Aquamarine, heliodor, and morganite is the pink one. Emerald is the other one. I haven't got any emerald. If anybody's got a large emerald they don't want, just send it on over. We'll work with those, and And then we'll also work with the Ankh and really work to integrate that again. So it's going to be a powerful piece. There are always surprises on the teleconference. I get a vague outline and I sort of understand what we want. The Aquamarine, we'll be working with the energies of Atlantis to bring those back into consciousness, in effect, as well. And then will be offering so that's on the 15th, and on the 22nd, the morning of the 22nd, for us in the UK, the actual time of the solstice is really awkwardly placed this year at 19 minutes past 4 on a Sunday morning. That's not so bad for you farm folk, is it? You're up milking cows at
up then, and
yeah.
Which is why at 8 o'clock I start, kind of heading down.
Well, that's not my usual waking time at all, but I'll be up. I'll be offering a teleconference. I like to offer them, or my team like me to offer them at the time of the solstice and the equinox, and because there's a lot of power available then, and it's available, for a block of time, a number of days. And the solstice window has opened. It opened yesterday, so that's when we get this big rush of energy coming in. It's about this planet's alignment with the galactic center, or universal center. So we're streaming a lot of energy in now. So things are very, very active, very potential, and there's a lot can take place. So yeah, I have these 2 teleconferences coming up, and I do one-to-one work as well. And you can access that through my website, which is www.davidmanningenergywork.com. There's an issue with payments. If you can't pay, just use the donate button and let me know what it is. I'm going to be getting a new website very soon because this fault can't be remedied, but I need a new website anyway. So there you go.
All kinds of that stuff is happening, even in my own world, where this is another thing where foundations and structures are crapping out so that we can build up some new, better ones. So,
yeah.
Yay!
Everything is shifting and changing, isn't it?
So, my team, when I'm like, yay, they're like, are you crazy? I'm like, no, not crazy. Actually, this is part of what we want, because this isn't quite exactly what we want right now. So let's focus on what we.
Yeah. And it's really, really important. And this is part of the death thing that's important, is that we just don't hold on.
Right.
Just really be willing to let things go, whether that's friendships and relationships, or clutter from your wardrobe, or a job that isn't serving you, or, whatever it is. Just let it go with as much grace as possible, or a website, just let it go and be willing to open the space for something new to emerge, because there is so much new now that is wanting to emerge for all of us. And it's important that we're open for that, because we have no idea what is about to land for us. Right. Really. We don't have it in our memory banks. We had those sort of wiped out purposefully, put into deep storage. That's the Atlantis. And not many people have memories of Atlantis. I've never read, for me, of a convincing memory. Maybe you have people that have accessed good stuff from Atlantis, but I've never read something that really got me, and I haven't accessed much myself. Just as a child, I would remember reading something about the myth of Atlantis, and I was like, what do you mean a myth? I knew that I was there, and that was the first time I'd come across, but it was like, I knew I was there. So, but I think that stuff is starting to unearth itself again, because we need it now. We need it, and it's meeting our future selves too. So it's a very interesting, hugely creative time.
Okay, so this is actually a kind of a lovely way to end this, because I will end this by saying, so even while you're saying this about the Atlantean myth, Dolores still right here. She's always right here on this side. She's like, you know what? I'm getting this real sense that this thing that we're doing right now as humans on the planet Earth, there will be groups out there of other beings, other realms, other times that are going to consider what we did here as dense physical human beings a myth as well, because it's so powerful and amazing. I never quite thought of that before. And that really came into my body very strongly as you were speaking. So, 3 big download experiences while talking to you, David. When can we do it again?
Soon as you want, as soon as you want. I love talking with you. I really do. And I can't wait to have you here to my home by the seaside, whenever we can arrange that. But also when I sort my visa out to come visit you there in the middle of the States. So.
Oh my gosh. Well, we'll have to talk. You're welcome here anytime. So for those of you who've joined us today live, thank you so much. For those who are catching the replay, thank you so much.
Yes, thank you for listening, really. And give us your feedback. We love to know how this conversation has.
Send me the links to the actual conferences so I can add them to this video, would you?
I will do. I will do.
All right.
Lots of love to you, huh? Always a pleasure.
Thank you so much. And for those of you who might be interested in exploring consciousness with BQH, you can find information on that at quantumhealers.com. And quantumhealers.com is a community for all kinds of wayshowers. David himself is a member there. We have a directory of people who offer healing modalities, energy work, readings of all kind. Quantumhealers.com. It's a worldwide international directory that's easy to use, and it's a very welcoming and open-minded community. So consider joining us there. Thanks so much, David. Have a great rest of your day, and thank you all for joining us.
You too. Lots of love. Bye-bye.
I'm going to go ride a horse. Bye.
Bye.